Got some fresh GKTECH goods to install today. This time we're going to be doing the Z33 aka 350z V35 or G35 Super Lock lower control arms. It's a big box with plenty of bits inside, so we'll start with the lock stops. Then you get the inserts for the rear of the arm, then the inserts for the front of the arm, and the inserts for the coilover bracket. You also get some dust boots, which protect PTFE line bearings, and 2 bolts for the compression rod cone, which I'll explain here in a few. Last but not least, you get the 4130 Chromoly one-piece Super Lock arms themselves, and a bonus set of instructions. Hooray! For those of you that don't know, the OEM arms suck. Just look at how horrible this lock is. Let's remedy that ASAP. Start by zapping your lugs off and removing your wheel. Then start by removing the end link nut and move right along to the strut nut and bolt. Once that's gone, move on to the ball joint split pin, get that out of the way, and then the ball joint nut itself. Give it a tap tap taparoo and remove the lower control arm off the cone, then move to the inner side, removing the nut and bolt there as well. The whole thing can now be recycled, as that's really all it's good for. Now remove the cross brace with your octo arms in full effect as shown here, then remove the compression rod split pin, then the nut, and remove the compression rod itself, recycling that sucker as stated previously. This is a comparison between the two, no contest in my humble opinion. Now, using a bearing puller, remove the compression cone and keep it for later. Now, let's talk lengths. The shortest length you can go is plus 25mm from OEM, or 35.5mm or 1.39 inches, measuring from the end of the extender to the start of the rose joint. Now, adjusting these out to the longest length, we're sitting at plus 50mm from OEM, or 60.5mm, aka 2.38 inches, using the same measurements I mentioned earlier. Now to install, pop the lower arm in, next install the arm to the ball joint, then the nut to the ball joint. Now onto the chassis stud, install the long spacer first, then the arm, then the smaller spacer, and temporarily install the nut to the chassis stud. Now install the inserts for the coilovers, then lift the arm up to the strut, put the bolt through, toss on the nut, and move on to your end link, installing the nut where it belongs. Now, that cone we spoke about earlier, toss that bad boy in the top and put the bolt through, tossing on the supplied washer and nut. Tighten and then torque those down to the specs shown on the screen. Now it is time to begin our torque festival. Head to the front side of the arm and torque to these here specs. Then move on to the ball joint and torque to these specs. Once you're done torquing, pop the split pin in and spread that sucker out. Hold the link pin on one side and then torque that bad boy down to these specs as well. Same thing for the coilover. Tighten, then torque to the specs shown right here on the screen. So much torque you'd think we're at a muscle car meet. Now remove the nut we temporarily put on earlier and install your cross brace, tossing on the nuts and tightening them all back down using your octopus arms to make it happen. Now for the big nuts, torque those down to 140 to 170 newton meters or 104 to 125 foot-pounds, and the smaller ones to 60 to 65 newton meters or 45 to 47 foot-pounds. Man, that's a lot of torquing we just did. Now, give her a final check to make sure that all of the bearings are running centrally and not cocked to the left or to the right. Once you're all dialed in with your bearings, go ahead and tighten all of the lock nuts down on all of the different parts of the arms, toss your wheel back on, toss your lug nuts back on, torque those Johnnies to spec, and admire your newly found angle for your Z33 chassis. Look at all that clearance. Now you can install your fun killer, aka the lock stop. This is optional depending on how much you like your steering rack or not. The nut can go on the front or back depending on how lame you want to be. Just make sure it's torqued to the specs shown on the screen. Follow us on the YouTubes, we do stuff, and if you can't install these properly, have someone else do it, like a professional. Email us with any questions as well. This is Officer Dan, Johnny Caps, and Octo Zach Part Due, signing off until next time. Peace.